Hey friends, I'm Pastor Sochiat, and let me welcome you to Beyond Sunday, where we'll have conversation, share stories, and hear insight that we hope inspire you to look more like Jesus. Today our guest is Pastor Jen Alexander.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I'm grateful to be here, really
Yeah.
grateful. You know, I realize it won't always be that Beyond Sunday is a conversation with the person who gave the message the day before, but just as one of the preachers, you know this, anytime you write a message, what you end up sharing, I mean, for me is often, I don't know, maybe a third of what I've prepared, what I've written, what God's been working on in my heart. So it's fun to just have another environment to be able to go beyond it, I guess. So I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you again. So grateful, so blessed to have you. This Sunday, we've been in this series, Waymaker now, a couple weeks, and you talked about David and what it means to be heart-led. David was a heart-led person, and you read Psalm 86, right? You read it in the beginning, you read it again at the end, and together as a church, we all prayed this prayer for a pure heart, right? My question is, like, what does that really actually mean for somebody to ask for a pure heart? Like, what does that look like?
Right. You know? Wow. I mean, that, of course, is like the central question, right? The primal question. What does it mean to have a pure heart? What did it mean for David? And what would it eventually mean when Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart? And I think it's something that we all want. I think for me, anytime we're having a conversation about sin, right, or things that, because obviously, I mean, if something isn't pure, it means it's dirty, it means it's blemished, it means that there's something wrong, something that isn't as it should be. And I think that that's generally how we think about sin, but I think sin is so much more helpful to talk about in relational terms than in any kind of like theological construct, right? And the way I was thinking about it this morning is, we're talking about the way. And I'm sure that the Chum family has a way. Like, we definitely have the Alexander family way, right? Things that are like, they might be explicit or they might just be implicit. But if one of our kids, I think it's simplest to understand it in the parent-child relationship, that when a child wants to please their parents, to be pure-hearted before their parents, but if they do something that is kind of outside of the norm, outside of the way, then the child's response, of course, is going to either be one of shame. That's the most common, right? Of course, like I feel ashamed when I'm with you. I'm head down. Or I'm going to just break from the relationship. I'm going to kind of disappear because being in the presence of my parents causes me to realize I know I did something that's outside of the way of our family. And I think that's how it feels to me. I said I'm a heart-led person. That's how it feels to me to want to be pure-hearted before the Lord. And that's what I hear in David is like, one of the terms that gets used in the Bible a lot is upright in heart. I want to be upright in heart, as in I want to be able to bring my full self before you, Lord, and not feel like there are parts of me that need to be hidden or parts of me that feel distant because of this blemish, because of this sin. And so that's what I hear in David is like, I want to be able to be fully present with you, Lord. So would you purify my heart so that the flow can come back, But of course, as Christians, we realize that isn't solved any other way than Jesus purifying our hearts. But to make that relational flow possible again, I guess that's how I think about it.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned kids, and you mentioned as a child being heart-led and your experience and growing up. And I'm a heart-led person myself too, and I have a couple heart-led kids. So even as a parent, when you recognize that you're raising heart-led children, like what could that look like? What could a healthy way of raising up heart-led children look like? Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, I know both of us just want to carry like such a humility of spirit. Like, we're parents and parenting is hard. Like, it isn't like, well, we have this figured out, so let us expert at you about this at all. But somewhere along the way, some of the advice that was given to me is become a student of your children, right? That you will love your child and parent them based on how you know them. And so study them. And we have 3 boys, we talk about this a lot, but definitely of our 3 boys, we have a very head like head-led child, right? He's a thinker, and then we have a gut-led child for sure, and then we have this heart-led child. He's our youngest, and in many ways, actually, when I think of David, I think of our youngest. And I think that a couple things. One is to be discerning in the activities that they participate in. I think right now there's so much pressure for children, obviously, especially to be involved in youth sports. Like that's the thing, right? Everybody needs to be an athlete. And heart-led children can be athletes, certainly. It's not that these categories are clean. But I think what my hope is for our heart-led child is that we would guide him and help him to go toward activities that really are best for someone who is led by their heart. And that may not be football.
Right.
It may not be football. That and the other day we actually were spending time together, and we don't do this all the time, but I've been trying to memorize some Bible verses with him. And actually one of the ones that came up was Proverbs 4:23, which says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Everything else flows from it. And so he and I got to have this conversation about how he is a very heart-led child. He has a tender heart. He's tender-hearted internally. He's tender-hearted in how he sees the world and experiences the world. And so there's a really high capacity for that tender heart to be hurt, to be wounded, to be mishandled, And so we talked about, what does this mean to guard your heart? I think tender-hearted people can put up walls around their heart. That's one way around it. It's like wall up, and then my heart won't get hurt. But that's not how we want to live. That's not who we want to be. That's not who we are. But the necessity of a gate, of a gate. Like, we got to be careful what you let into your tender heart. And so that, I think that was a helpful kind of metaphor for him to sit with, is like, who gets in, what words get in, needing to guard your heart so that it doesn't get hard and it doesn't get trampled.
Yeah, it's really like healthy boundaries, right? Healthy, like you said, gates. And that's different from walls and blocking people out, and which can lead to isolation.
Yeah, but it's sure tempting when you have a tender heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, as I think about heart-led people, or even maybe feelers, right? Oftentimes, feelers tend to lean towards this thought of, if I don't feel God, God's not there. Like, I really haven't been feeling God.
Right. Totally, I've heard that many times.
Yeah, like which is really a dangerous mindset to have when it comes to faith. I have some thoughts about it, but would love to hear what you have to say about that.
I want to hear your thoughts. So let's make sure we get to yours. I guess I can spitball a couple. I mean, I think that, it's dangerous to attach your relationship to anyone, let alone God, to your feelings, because relationships are inherently, there's duty involved, there's rhythms involved, there's things that you should do to maintain the health of a relationship, and that certainly is true before the Lord. I think too, I often talk about those times as feeling dry, like I'm just in a dry season, or you hear somebody that's in a dry season. I think something that I've learned, I'm 46 now, is that those dry seasons are often indicators of something that's lurking beneath. True in relationships as well, in marriages as well. When you're in a dry season, it's often because there's an unanswered question, or there's an issue unresolved that needs attention. And so I think often there's a period of dissatisfaction and like things tasting kind of dusty in your mouth before there's an opportunity for renewal. So I think sometimes those seasons of dryness or not feeling it are often building toward the expectation of something new.
Yeah, that's good.
But what about you?
You want my thoughts on that?
Yeah, heck yeah, I want your thoughts.
Well,
we do.
Mine's a little more, I guess, I can't say, maybe I could say simple. We just can't have that mindset. We can't connect, like you said, how we feel to God being absent or being present.
Right.
Because he promises to be with us always.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we say, I'm not feeling God right now, or I don't feel his presence, and we land on that point, like that's our fact right now.
Right.
We miss out on the fact that he actually is with us right now. He is here. Yeah. He is walking alongside us, and he's knocking on the door of our hearts. And it goes back to, here I stand at the door and knock, right? That's not just an invitation to sit with him for the first time. That's an invitation every day. Right. So every day I stand, this is not in the word, but I'll associate version is,
Yeah.
here I stand at the door and knock. Whoever hears my voice and recognizes it. But are we listening for that knock?
Yeah.
Or are we just stuck in our feelings? I'm a feeler, so I've had those thoughts, you know, and I've experienced people come to me struggling in their faith, struggling in life. And I'm like, how's your relationship with God right now? It's, I don't feel God right now.
Yeah.
Well, are you in the word?
Right.
Because he does speak through the word.
Yeah.
I haven't been in my Bible, right? Or are you at least attending church? I haven't been to church in a couple weeks.
Right.
So their feelings are, and the feeling of God not being present is impacting their relationship with God.
Yep.
It's stopping them from engaging in faith because they don't feel.
Right.
And so we have to. My thought is also that we have to cultivate these rhythms regularly.
The
practices of, you know, staying in the word regularly,
Yeah.
so that we constantly hear his word even when we don't feel him.
Right.
Staying in community
Yeah.
regularly, so that we're surrounded by the people of God, so that we can see God through people,
Yeah.
right? And so my thought is like, you just can't do that. You just can't. Your feelings can't be the end all be all of God's presence
Right.
in your life.
Feelings do not equate to truth. Like we
Amen.
talked about in the
Yeah,
message.
yeah. So I've had to learn that,
Yeah,
you know,
me
in my
too.
own faith walk, and
Yeah.
encourage others too. But you know, there's also this misunderstanding of being heart-led and spirit-led too, right? Like feelers sometimes often think that when they feel something, that's God. Right?
Yeah.
But they have to be able to. We have to be able to discern what is our feelings versus what is spirit-led, right?
Yeah.
What are some ways to be able to
Yeah.
discern and live that out? And
Right. Well, conceptually, in this little kind of mini series we're doing right now, we're saying, you know, there are 3 parts to the way, and you're likely naturally inclined toward one of them, but you've got to be balanced, you know, kind of by the other 2 in order to be really walking in the complete way of Jesus. So I think we've spent more time talking really about how sometimes heart-led people still need to pay attention to the way of the law, like the way of the right thing, whether I feel like it or not. But there also is this way of the Spirit that I should go even if my heart is not aligned. And, you know, again, I'm a feeler and I tend to live in stories. And so a story that comes to my mind when I think about that is when Ryan and I were living out in Washington State, where we're both from, and we had moved into a new house a year and a half prior and kind of thought we were there to stay. I mean, if you had said, how long do you think you'll be here? We would have said forever. And then he got a phone call from this pastor in Minnesota that said, hey, I've gotten your name from a couple places. Is there any chance you would consider coming to this church called Hosanna in Minnesota? And Ryan came home and told me that, and I said, absolutely not. I mean, our son was 2.5, our parents were around, our siblings caring for him. I had just found out I was pregnant, so my heart was like, we're not going anywhere. Like, we are by our families now. My heart was completely closed to that possibility. But I remember saying, you know, if the Lord wants to move a mountain to get us there, then I'll go. And then that's precisely what happened. It just could not have been more clear that that is what the Spirit was doing. And so that I was put in a position of like, either I'm going to listen to my heart and disobey the Spirit, or I'm going to go where the Spirit is leading, even though my heart doesn't want to. And 15 years later, of course, I'm so glad that that's the decision that we made. But it was really hard at the time. And I think we do end up in times like that, where what the Spirit of God is doing might actually conflict with the feelings of my heart.
right, because everything felt so good, felt so
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm thankful that you guys followed the Spirit,
Ew.
and that you're here. Your leadership, Ryan's leadership, is what we needed here, I think, in the South Metro, but at this church. At this church, but in South Metro. So you guys have impacted me, my family, in a major way, and so blessed by you guys. Well, thank you for joining us today.
It's a joy.
I know we could talk so much more,
yeah. Oh,
maybe
yeah.
for our next time,
Yeah.
but it was a blessing to have you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond Sundays. We hope that it was a blessing to you and that you were inspired by our time in conversation, and we'll see you next time.